Welcome to the Brave Enough Show. I am so excited you are here. I don't know if you know this about me, but I burned out hard in 2013, and that's how this whole thing started. So if you have never listened to that part of the story and why you're here, go back. I challenge you to go back to season 1, episode 1, and at least listen to the first season of the Brave Enough Show. And if you want to work with me in 2024, there are so many opportunities. It's not too late. Check out my website, becomebraveenough.com. I have so many resources for you besides this podcast. And I'm super excited because today we're going to be talking about stress and mindset. One of the biggest ways that I have learned to really understand what stress is and how to change my mindset for life so that every year I'm improving my skill set is through teaching and gathering women. And I do that every fall in the Brave Enough conference. If you are a woman in medicine or you are a woman leader, if you're a woman physician and you have never come to the Brave Enough conference, this is the year to be there. You do not want to miss out. I'm telling you right now, you want to get there. So check out braveenoughconference.com. I want you there. I want to meet you there. This year, we're going to have the most incredible speakers like we do every year. I'm bringing in women to really teach us how they rose from the pit, right? We've all been in the pit. Some of us are there now. And how do we get out of that? And how do we actually have strategies and mindset shifts to apply in our real life? And if I could read every testimony of the Brave Enough conference, I would. It's the most incredible conference. You don't want to miss out. Gift this to yourself. Get to the conference. This year, I'm doing a cool referral program where if you bring a friend, you get a special hour with me, you and your friend. You also get your name in a drawing for a trip to the spa, which is incredible at the Omni. So go to braveenoughconference.com and check it out today. Today's guest is Dr. Kristi Angevine, and she is a board certified OBGYN. And she's a master certified life coach. And I have gotten to know her through my conference, through my retreats, and through a mutual friend. She's just a really incredible human being. She's one of those people who, if you're sitting in front of her, she makes you feel like you're the only person in the room and there could be 300 people in the room. You don't want to miss out in our conversation today. We're talking about high achievers and how we overthink and how we really can overcome perfectionism. And so many of us listening feel that way, and we struggle with perfectionism. We struggle with being high achievers. We struggle with really learning how to set those boundaries. And we're going to be talking about stress today and the mindset and mindset shifts. So out our awesome conversation now. Well, hello, Dr. Angevine. It's so exciting to have you on the show. And you're one, I was telling everybody today that I was talking to about recording this, that you're one of my most favorite coaches in the coaching space because you're such a real soul who makes whoever's sitting in front of you feel like they're the only person in the room. That's one of your superpowers.
Oh, I love that. That feels authentic and feels good. That really lands. And that's so nice of you to say that.
Well,
And
it's
I
true.
think
It's very
one
true.
of your superpowers is maximizing and amplifying what you see around you. So I'm really excited to do this too. This is kind of my excuse to be able to sit around and like chat with you, and be able to sort of invite everyone else in too.
I know. I'm excited. We are recording this the first week after the holidays, and I just feel like it's just been like a warp of like the last couple weeks. I'm like, what day is it? What am I supposed to be doing today? Like trying to get back into the swing of things, and you know how challenging that can be.
100%. Yes, I've had a little bit of feeling disoriented today as well. Our kids actually started back in school yesterday, so they just went back. But it still feels like a transition. So it does feel a little bit wonky here. I can relate.
Yes, 100%. Okay, so one of the reasons I wanted you on is because so you and I have bonded over several different things, conference, retreat. We have a mutual friend. We both are really big believers in one-on-one relationships with other women and empowering other women. But one of the reasons I wanted you in this specific season where we're talking all about stress is because I know and I've seen you really talk a lot about mindset shifts and getting mindful. And I think that oftentimes we don't even realize how stressed we are. We don't realize the effects that stress has on our body physically or emotionally or mentally. And you do a lot of coaching with women on changing their mindset, like just changing their mindset and how powerful that is. And you also are a big believer in habits and creating healthy habits and mindful habits. So I would love for you to kind of open up by talking a little bit, just introducing my listeners to what made you change from being an OBGYN to being an OBGYN who has a business that actually helps other women change their mindset and overcome stress.
Yeah. Well, I do want to I don't want to not answer your question, but I do want to emphasize something really important that you just said, the idea that we don't ever really realize how stressed we are. I think that's such a big point. Sometimes we just get so accustomed to how we're feeling and we lose perspective about how we actually feel. And it can take a while to realize, oh, what I'm experiencing right now, it doesn't, number one, not everybody feels this way. And, like all the time. And I don't have to feel this way all the time. And sometimes just being able to name that is really powerful. So, but to answer your question, so I had lots of stress that I didn't realize. Just didn't realize that I had, I didn't realize I had a lot of the habits I had. I didn't realize a lot of the stress that I had. And I started as I learned about life coaching and in a kind of a happenstance way, listened to a podcast, thought, oh, this is going to be such a dumb podcast. I don't want to listen to it. I'm on call. I'm tired, but I'll listen to it. And then I was hooked because it was just so practical. And it was sort of like a blending of cognitive and somatic ideas in a way that didn't seem just like therapy. And so I got really fascinated in where that sort of convergence of mindset meets emotional management and how we can support ourselves in a way that, I'd never learned in medical school. And so it gave me sort of like a lexicon for how to talk about my thoughts and how to talk about my emotions in ways that made it easier to get through my clinic day and run behind less and not have so much self-criticism and like irritation when I was on call. And it helped me so much, feel so much better that I got super excited about it. So I started doing coaching in the margins of my life. And then I sort of led this double life of like coaching early in the morning, coaching late at night, OBGYNing during the day. And I got to a point where I didn't know how to do both. Like I was basically overextending, not realizing it. Like the sort of the meta awareness there was not clear. And then I decided to make the big decision to do something very different. And, as you can imagine, it took a lot of courage, took a lot of guts because it was super scary to go away from something I knew so well to something that felt like a blueprint free existence, the starting a business.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So much of what you just said resonates with me. And it's on a personal level, like I totally, I can identify with so much of the, like, knowing that something's not right, but ignoring it for a long time. That resonates with me. I think that resonates with a lot of women. And then not knowing how to change and shift. And I think in many careers, and especially in medicine, we're taught, like, we're told it's stressful from day one. Like people outside of medicine that maybe our family, our friends that aren't physicians, they'll say, oh, that has to be so stressful. Or, oh, how do you do it? Right. It's the assumption that it's stressful, it's hard, it's horrible, it's bad, it's never, and this is just what you signed up for. Like that is what it is. And then you have this other piece, which is very patriarchal, very structured. Everybody works like this. Everybody works full time. Everybody takes full call. This is what a doctor looks like, right? So you have this like expectation to sell your soul for the rest of your life because you happen to like this profession and you're good at it. And then you have this, well, this is how you have to stay in it. And what the result of that is, I'm finding, is like you either are suffering in medicine or you leave medicine, which breaks my heart. It
Yeah.
physically makes me sick, because I think there are so many amazing physicians, both men and women, who are just leaving medicine because the options they're given are crap. The options are full-time, full call, full leader, whatever, versus leave.
Yeah.
Right.
And
And,
oh,
and
what you
so I
said is
love,
so true.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I love that you are helping people figure out plan B and blow up the expectations. So talk to us a little bit about how you use this to help yourself, obviously. Then you did this huge like jump leap where you had no blueprint and you decided to be your own boss, which is terrifying and yet amazing. And I have such respect for you. How did you then decide to use this to help other people?
So I think it deserves just mentioning to your listeners that just because I decided to do something different doesn't mean, as you were saying, that the only option is stay and suffer or bail. There are so many things in between. I just happened to find something that I loved as much, if not more, than medicine that really sort of surprised me and I never would have expected. But there is so much in between, even though we are sold that bill of goods of either you do it this way or maybe you're not cut out for this. Right. So even though that's what I did, definitely not the only way. So how did I get into helping people? Um, well, during my coach training, part of the training is kind of an apprenticeship model where you do go help people and you learn by doing and you go from there. And so as I was training, I was doing this and I had no intention of becoming a life coach. I just wanted to learn more about it. And so I just happened to be coaching physicians. And then I realized that I really loved it. It actually touched, I majored in humanities, international humanities and psychology. And then at the last minute, did all my pre-med recs in college. And so it kind of took me back to some of the things that really lit me up in terms of things that I deeply loved doing. And I didn't realize it at the time. Like at the time, it felt kind of new and clunky and awkward and weird. And it didn't have, I didn't have even like an embryo of an idea for what I was going to do in the future, but it just sort of built on itself slowly. And when I really sat with myself and what my intuition said, it was very clear, like I couldn't not do this.
And I love that you found that within yourself, like you sat with yourself and you let yourself kind of figure that out. I was listening to someone yesterday on Instagram and she was talking about, I don't even know who this person was. I just stumbled upon a video and she said, what we need to do more of is when we feel stuck is just sit with that thing that we are called to. And it could be the littlest thing. It could be like reading a book or trying a new exercise or joining a new friendship. And she said, if we just sat with the things that actually call to us, she's like, we get called to things all the time, but we ignore them because we're so busy. you will find your passion. You will find what lights your soul on fire. You will find the new thing that maybe you're called to do. But if you don't sit with it, and if you don't just slowly make small movements, people think they have to make this huge radical change. And oftentimes we don't. We just have to sit with what we are called to, what brings us joy, and just sit with that for a little bit. And then be brave enough to actually pursue it. And she said, you don't have to pursue it like full time. You just have to pursue it for an hour and see where that leads you. And I was like, that is such good advice. Because I think sometimes we think like we're so unhappy in our current role or our current relationship or our current job that we think we have to make these radical changes, and we don't have the energy to make a radical change. So we just stuff it down. So I love that you came to this awareness through just sitting with yourself and listening to your own intuition. That's amazing. So I want to get into some of the advice that I know you give your clients and you teach women. And one of those is, talk to us about stress-inducing habits that you see in the women you coach. What are some of the habits that don't treat stress, but actually take your stress and make it worse?
Well, I think you actually just hit on one of them, and you've hit on a few in what you're talking about. But first of all, like when we have an all or none sort of mindset, that habit of seeing it's either this or that, it's either a radical change or doing nothing, that it's in the same category that I would say catastrophizing is, because catastrophizing, we go from things are fine to I'm living in a box, I've hurt my patient, my family has left me. And so probably one of the most stress-inducing habits is this all or none, seeing either things are perfect or things are catastrophes. And to be honest, it's actually really useful for physicians to be able to be catastrophic thinkers. Like I want my ICU nurse to be able to think of the worst case scenarios and plan and prepare for them. Right. It's great.
Yeah.
The problem is if there's an underbelly and we don't recognize that in more benign scenarios where our life isn't at risk, our patients aren't at risk, where we're perhaps seeing catastrophe and not actually just making preparations for it, where we get stuck in going from like things are fine to things are terrible, and that's all we see. Because, the way we see the world is through a lens, and our lens of our beliefs, which if our beliefs are that the worst thing is going to possibly happen, or the only way I can get out of this job is by leaving it, if that's all we see, we will be excluding other alternative ways of seeing the world. And that will be extremely stressful because that's all we'll see. So does that make sense?
Yes.
That it can be such a strength and at the same time be something that's such a burden.
Yeah.
And in that same line is a lot of physicians are so good at being thoughtful, but the underbelly of being thoughtful and carefully thinking through things is constantly ruminating and second guessing. And when you're ruminating, second guessing, it's like you're eroding your own trust in yourself, which can lead straight to a habit of self-criticism. And a lot of us, like we've got through our training because we were like, okay, if I'm just hard on myself, I'm going to work really hard. I'm going to rise to, whatever level my attending is saying I need to rise to. And so I'm going to push, I'm going to go. And the way I do that is I shame myself, tell myself I need to be better, tell myself I'm not good enough because I'm going to prove somebody wrong, or I'm going to push through that and I'm going to work hard. So we may have developed a habit of self-criticism at a time when we needed to do something really difficult and it helped us enough, and then it overstays its welcome. Because if the narrative in our head is you're not smart enough, you're not pretty enough, you're not making enough money, you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, if it's all that, it's an uncomfortable, stressful sort of soup to live in. And then I'd say probably the last most stress-inducing habit is any sort of habit of distraction or numbing. So where we are, these could be like you mentioned, like not being taking time to be quiet with yourself. When we're really busy, the idea of stopping and slowing down is antithetical. Who the hell has time to stop and slow down and feel their intuition and feel their body and think about their thoughts? We're just busy. We got to keep going. But sometimes in the busying and the overworking and the scrolling and things like that, it's just so much noise. We do lose track of ourselves, even though it's coping, right? It has a benefit, but it has an underbelly.
Yeah. I love this because what you've said about these limiting beliefs is so in line with what I teach in several of my courses. And that is your limiting belief is benefiting you somehow. Like it's feeding something, right? And the numbing behaviors are feeding you. You're doing it because it feels good. You're not clinging to this limiting belief because it makes you feel bad. You're clinging to it because it's feeding a part of you that needs to be fed. And so that's
Exactly.
why it's so hard to release it, right? Because like you said, in what we were taught, like if we just really shame ourselves into thinking like we aren't good enough, then we're going to study harder, we're going to do better on that test, right? Or then we're going to we're going to avoid that food, and we're going to body shame ourselves, then we won't eat this bad thing. Like it's somehow we think it's helping us, but in the end it ends up hurting us. So what are some practical things that somebody listening can do to change those limiting beliefs, to change those habits, those numbing behaviors that you talked about?
Yeah. So, of course, as you and I both know, this is not something that you just do a couple cute little tricks and then all of a sudden everything is better the next day. Because if it were, we would all do it. We would just go, oh,
Right.
there's the top 3 things to change all the habits that take more than they give. And I'm going to just change them. And tomorrow, all is going to be great. That's just not how it works, right? The self
Mhm.
help sort of, I don't know, stereotype sometimes will suggest if you just think right and think the most positive things, you'll be fine. And I just want to sort of put the plug in for like, this is somewhat like a long, slow, tedious process. And that's why sometimes we avoid it because it's a pain in the ass. And that
Mhm.
being said, there are some very specific things. And the first thing I would think of that I think of when somebody comes to me and says, listen, I am stuck. I want to change this. I want to understand my limiting beliefs better. What the heck do I do? And I'm busy and I don't really have very much time, is going to make some people who are listening to this roll their eyes and be like, really, come on now. But you actually have to just to slow down. And it really can be just
Yeah.
for 5 minutes. And by
Mhm.
slow down for 5 minutes, I mean, even if your version of slowing down is while you're in your car driving to pick up while you're eating food, turning off a podcast and just being with yourself a little bit, whatever
Mhm.
slowing down is for you. It doesn't have to be like sitting on the meditation pillow and actually like telling people to leave you alone for 5 minutes. But the more you can do, I think the more effective it is. But slowing down and just being with, "Wait, what's here for me now?" And I always like
Mhm.
for the people in the high achieving world who are oftentimes overthinkers and really good at ruminating to get out of your head and get into your body. And if you
Mhm.
roll your eyes when you hear this, like you're not in, you're in good company. Like when people used to tell me about, you know, um, feeling my intuition or feeling the vibrations in my body with my emotions, I thought that they were just talking crazy talk. But there's really good literature to show that when we are more in touch with our somatic experience, we actually can be more in touch with our limiting beliefs. So what this looks like is taking a few minutes, and I usually close my eyes, but you can use your eyes open, leave them open, and put like a hand on your chest, hand on your belly or your thigh or your chair, something like that, something so you can just touch your body and just be like, what's going on for me right now?
Yeah.
And look objectively at the sensations you're feeling. This is where you can use your scientist mind and be like, ooh, is there some like constriction in my right shoulder? Is my scapula feeling a little bit buzzy? And just look at it like you would, doing an H&P, very objective. Like what's going on in my body? What's here for me now?
Mhm.
And just by doing that, oftentimes you will notice, oh, there's a tightness, there's an openness, there's a fast feeling, and you might notice some emotions come up. Some people do this for 3 minutes and they're crying. Other people, they're just bored, they're restless, and they want to get out of their own skin. But when you can just be with yourself for a couple minutes, you can actually start getting access to some of the things that you're thinking that may not be serving you. So I
Yeah.
love this because it's like a doorway in that can quiet your mind and actually help you notice what's there. It's not really the most comfortable to do. Like, don't do this and be
Yeah.
like, "Oh, I'm going to feel great after this." But it can actually be a way to start seeing what some of those limiting beliefs are.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I love this because I have this habit that I've created for myself twice a day. It's a minute. It's like when I'm getting out of the car at work, if I'm going to work that day at the hospital, I make myself pause by putting my hands on the steering wheel for a minute. And then I do the same thing when I'm coming home and I'm in my garage. I pause and put my hands on the steering wheel. And maybe I need to be like touching my own heart. That's a good idea. But I do it, I have to physically force myself, Kristi, because I'm so
Totally.
in a hurry that if I
Yeah.
don't put my hands on the steering wheel, I will literally just be getting out of the car, going to doing the next thing. And I have
Yeah.
found that when I do this pause, it brings me an awareness of what is going on, What stress do I have that I don't want to bring into the hospital with me? What stress do I have that I from my day that I do not want to bring into my house? Like, right? What do I need to let go of? What was hard? Just acknowledging even where my mind is. And I think that when I have women spend 30 minutes by themselves a week to start in my master class, and it sounds like so little time, but it is so hard for women to find 30 minutes a week for themselves. And most of them will come back and say, like, that was horrible when they start doing this, because you don't want to go into your mind, right? When things are when you're over functioning, when you're over committed, when you're stressed out, when there's a million things to do, when your when you're, I call it running the list, like your brain starts running the list. It is not a fun place to be, and as you mentioned, and yet it is so important that we create these habits. And I love that your number one thing is just slowing down and spending time with yourself, even if it's 5 minutes. It is so, so powerful.
Yeah.
So
Can I say something, Sasha? Like,
yeah,
one of the,
yeah.
well, I think for the people who find this really terrible, I think like what you said about like forcing yourself to pause and recognize like what's here that I don't want to bring in. I mean, I call that the 3 N's, like to name, notice, and normalize. If it's really uncomfortable for
Mm.
you, I think it's helpful to go in and be like, I'm going to be a witness and narrator here. My only job is just
Ooh,
to
that's good.
like be the person who's documenting like what's going on. So I'm going to name, oh, there's tightness, there's anxiety. I'm going to notice what it feels like. And then when you normalize it, you give yourself that compassion, like, oh, it makes perfect sense that on my way home from the hospital, that this is what I've got with me. And it makes perfect sense. I don't want to be grabbing the steering wheel right now. I'd rather be going and going and going. Oh, it makes so much sense. Okay. Good to
Mm,
know. Just
mm,
name, notice, normalize,
mm.
because then it gives you like almost like a thing to do while you're sitting there being with yourself, which might
Yes,
feel awful. And if it feels awful, you're not going to do it. You can be like, okay,
yes,
but I have a thing to do while I'm being myself. Right. So I love
yes.
the steering wheel thing. That's a beautiful way to make it more practical.
Oh, that's so good. Thank you for sharing those three N's. That was brilliant. So aren't habits part of our personality? There's people out there that are just that and I'm probably one of them, that for years I'm like, I'm just not a person who can do yoga. I'm not a person who can meditate. That's not my personality. Right. And I think it's another excuse for me just to overfunction and keep going and ignore until the world is falling apart. And then I have like a total breakdown where I'm like, mama's in her room crying, and the kids are like, what's going on in there? So, so like what would you say? I mean, can we change our habits? Can we actually create healthier new versions of ourselves?
Yeah. So, I mean, 100% yes. And also, it makes perfect sense that most of us walk around feeling like we have a very sort of fixed personality. And on one hand,
Mhm.
we do have some things that we're just naturally great at, and that things that we naturally aren't so great at. Beautiful. But when it comes to habits, the way I think about them is it's synonymous with what you were saying about like some of the things that we do that have a hidden benefit, even though they don't serve us. All of our habits,
Mhm.
they're all, the way I think about them is they're the things that we think, feel, and do on autopilot that are learned solutions. So at some point in time, we developed a habit, maybe self criticism one, for example. If I beat myself up and I'm hard enough on myself, I will work harder. So how is that productive or adaptive? Well, that helps me get through rounds. That helps me study more. That helps me stay awake. That helps me, neglect, maybe sleeping or peeing to get this thing done. And there's a benefit to that because people see me as a hard worker. So I develop a habit as a solution. It's learned, it has a benefit, and then I repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. But because habits are learned, they can be unlearned. So we can look at like,
Mm.
oh, why did this habit come to be? Why did I start my perfectionistic thinking? Why was I always thinking, oh, it's better to be better? Oh, well, I thought it's better to be better because that time they made a mistake and got in trouble, it felt horrible. So the way I avoid that is I always think it's better to be better and I work hard and do this. So if that's now no longer serving me, can I get to, like you mentioned, limiting beliefs? Can I get to whatever belief is driving this habit? The belief that like maybe
Mhm.
I don't trust myself. Therefore, I'm just going to scroll on my phone because I don't want to go try doing this new project because I might fail because that would feel awful. Oh, but if I get to the heart of this and realize, oh, this is what's underneath this, all of this, which some of this requires, deep dive coaching, requires, trauma therapy for those who need it, requires having a mentor to help you walk through all this. This isn't, again, an overnight thing. But sometimes understanding what's at the heart of a habit then helps you go, oh, maybe I can examine this in a different light and I can do something that's more purposeful. So 100% habits,
Mhm.
they're learned. And if they're learned, they can be unlearned and you can design new ones.
Mhm. Yeah. Oh my gosh. So good. So, so good. So what if there's someone listening right now that is thinking like, oh my gosh, this is me. I do all those things. I ruminate. I have all or nothing thinking. I don't want to think about my stress. I don't want to think about how I should change, but I'm going to promise myself that I'm going to give myself 3 minutes a day of thinking. What is a prompt that you would encourage that person to start with?
Like a prompt for like being with themselves for 3 minutes a day.
Yeah.
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 So there's two that come to mind. The first one is what's here for me now?
What's here
Just
for me now? I
just
love
what's here for
that.
me now. Like, and it could be thoughts, it could be memories, it could be anything. Like
Mm,
physical sensation, like what's here now? I mean, you go at it
yeah.
with that sort of beginner's mind, like innocently curious, like
Mhm.
what is going on here? Like so interesting, like like you would with a friend who you're fascinated by. Like, tell me all the things. What's
Yeah.
here for me now? You will
Yeah.
open the door. It's like opening a junk drawer that you haven't looked in a while. You'll be checking in with yourself in a way that will feel new and fresh. And so it can be,
Yeah.
if you're like, what's here for me now? With exasperation, it won't work so well. But if you approach it with this like curious warmth, it's usually really nice.
Yeah.
The next question that I love is a little, I mean, it may land as a tricky one, but for some people who like this, I think it's really nice. What am I worried about that I'm afraid to put to words? Because if we're
Oh,
walking around with something
yeah.
heavy that like putting it to words seems like it's going to be, it's like saying, oh, the unit's really quiet. We don't want to put it to
Yeah.
words. Sometimes just by giving that invitation, like, what am I worried about that I'm afraid to put to words? And just feeling
Yes.
into that, I think can be so revealing.
Mm, that is so powerful. Oh my gosh, she has given us so many great questions and things to think about on today's podcast. It's been such a good, deep conversation. Now you all understand why I love spending any time that I can with this woman, because she always leaves me better and leaves me thinking and leaves me feeling more in control of myself and more at peace with myself. And part of that is because you're an Enneagram 9 and you just ooze peace and mindfulness. And I love that. So thank you so much for coming on the show today. Tell my listeners, where can they find out about you? Where can they learn how to work with you, etc.?
Well, thank you for this time together. It's always a treat. I'm so grateful you're in the world doing the work that you do with your people. The world would be, emptier without you doing all the hard
Oh,
things that you
thank
do.
you.
It's awesome. So thank you for letting me be a part of that. I keep things really simple. My business is called Habits on Purpose. So I have a podcast, Habits on Purpose. My website's habitsonpurpose.com, and I do a small group coaching program for physicians, Habits on Purpose for Physicians. I keep it super simple.
Thank you so much for coming on today. And I can't wait to see you and hug you in 2024.
That sounds amazing. Thank you so much.
Okay, now you can see why I love that woman so much and I have such respect for her. And listen, I just can't even express how thankful I am for the community that I have in all of you and women like Kristi Angevine. She's just an amazing person and physician and coach and mom and friend. And I get to have these amazing conversations. And I hope that they bring you knowledge and empowerment and grace and something that you can take with you and be kinder to yourself today. If you love this podcast, if you learned anything from the Brave Enough Show, please go and subscribe. Please leave me a review and please refer a friend to this podcast. It really helps me keep it going. It helps Apple Podcasts bump it to the top, and it just helps me know that people are listening. So the other thing I wanted to leave you with is my newsletter. Every Friday, which I've completely redone my newsletter for 2024, I send out an email. I'm getting really simple. I'm just sending out emails of what's on my mind that week, what I learned that week. If you want to get my 30-second read called The Scoop, go to becomebraveenough.com. On the landing page, you can sign up for my Friday newsletter called The Scoop. I will see you there.